We are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret society, opposed to secret oaths, opposed to secret proceedings, secret proceedings. No official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome to Conspiracy Corner Podcast, everyone. This is Abe, your host. It is October the 5th, I believe. No, October the 6th. It is 8:30 a.m. I just got off work. Did a little bit of overtime this week. Basically, we're behind the truck because we had a walkthrough, so we had to condition the whole store, or fronting as some people call it. Basically moving all the items to the front so all the shelves look pretty for the big bosses. But yeah, so it's been a minute since I had put out an episode. I took a little bit of time off. I did some, me and Sammy went to Oktoberfest, had a good time doing it here in town on Main Street. But my mother-in-law had surgery, so she stayed here for like 4 days or something like that. Basically, on her hand, she's got like carpal tunnel, so she was letting it heal up and stuff. And she was actually staying in the room where I do my recording. So, yeah, that's why you haven't heard from me in a while. It hasn't been nothing like laziness or anything. It's just, yeah, life's been a little busy, a little crazy. But, I wanted to do a little update before we get started on my plans for October. Now, we do cover paranormal and true crime and stuff like that, you know, just because that's something I'm interested in, the macabre, stuff like that. I have a plan for October that basically I'm going to obviously put out new episodes. I'm going to focus mainly on like paranormal. I got some more Jack the Ripper episodes coming out, which is what this episode's going to be on. True crime stuff. Yeah, stuff like Halloween related is what I plan on doing for this whole month of October. Now, the world is insane and crazy out there, obviously, as far as like the wizard potion and the mandates and all that crazy nonsense that they're pushing forward. Agenda 21, all that jazz. I've been on fire as far as covering just that subject. If some new stuff comes out, I will definitely cover it, obviously. Anything like news-wise. But for just this month of October, honestly, I'm going to focus mostly on just spooky, scary stuff, fun stuff. So I hope you guys enjoy this month, and I hope you guys enjoy the episodes coming out. As far as like, I am going to put out, like I said, obviously new episodes on spooky, paranormal, true crime, all that jazz. But I'm also, since you're listening, if you're listening on YouTube, on Conspiracy Corner Podcast, the channel on YouTube, I have an old channel with like tons of episodes of paranormal, true crime, stuff like that, macabre, horror. I'm going to actually put out older episodes with newer episodes also. Like obviously, like today I'm going to put out a new episode. But I'm also going to put out reruns of like paranormal episodes that I've done on the old channel, because I'm starting this channel from scratch. So you might see those pop up too, and it might be an episode that you missed, or it might sound cool. So yeah, I hope you enjoy altogether. Now today we're covering Jack the Ripper, 2 murders, and it's Long Liz, and I think Kate is the other one. I do have, this is kind of an ongoing series, so if you're watching on YouTube, during the credits, if you missed any of the other Jack the Ripper episodes, I'll leave those so you can click on them and watch them. But yeah, if you're on YouTube and you'd rather listen audio only to save your phone a battery if you're at work or whatever, you can find us on Google Podcasts, Radio Public, Spotify, and Anchor. And we also have uncensored stuff on BitChute. You can find us on Breaker too if you want audio only. But yeah, we'll get on with the show. So this is the murder of Long Liz. The rain was falling sluggishly on the cobbles of Berner Street. Everything felt cold and clammy to the touch. The distant moan of a steam tug was echoed by the great clock of Christchurch, Spitalfields, calling the 4 quarters and pausing dolefully before throwing itself into the single hour. Under the arches of the London and the Blackwall Railway Company, a solitary glass lamp cast its sickly yellow glare over the worn, uneven stones, glinting on the iron-rimmed wheels of the little trap as it lurched and clattered in uneven, noisy progress along the sodden street. Tonight seemed wrapped in a muffler of damp haze, and the hooves of the little pony threw up spatters of mud which clung for a moment to the oilskin driver, before sliding down into rivulets that fell around his feet. At the end of Berner Street, the 2-wheeler slowed to enter a dark courtyard. A pair of large wooden gates, wide open, pressed themselves against the tall, long, windowless walls that flanked either side of the entrance, forming a passage of total darkness some 20 feet long and about 9 feet wide. The passage gave way to a small courtyard that was bounded on the right by the wall of a workingmen's club, occupying the whole length of the court. Lights were on, and the windows contrasted with the darkness on the opposite side, where the tailors and cigarette makers who occupied the cottages had turned in for the night. The lights from the club fell on the cottages, intensifying the gloom in the court. Despite the darkness, the pony was sure-footed as he trod the familiar stones, his feet clattering on the irregular boulders that ran down the center of the passage. The crouching oilskin figure released the reins in anticipation of the end of his journey. Suddenly, in terror, the animal shied to the left, almost throwing the driver from the trap box seat. The driver cursed and tapped the creature with a whip, but terrified, it would not move. Pressing itself further against the left-hand wall, sensing some unknown peril in the inky blackness, the driver, perhaps also conscious of danger, reached over and prodded the blackness with his whip. The leather tip met something large and soft, which the pony was determined not to pass. The flickering light of a match revealed to the driver what with keener senses the terrified animal had already discovered. Now the terror was shared. The International Workingmen's Educational Club was considered by many of its neighbors to be nothing more than a noisy drinking club, where Saturday nights would culminate in noisy singing and revelry. In fact, the serious aims of the Socialist League that had started the club were largely realized. In both its membership and activities, it drew its followers mainly from many Russians, Poles, and continental Jews, who made up the diverse East End community. But any working man who professed socialism was welcomed, whatever his nationality. That evening there had been a meeting at 8 p.m. on the necessity of socialism among Jews, and more than 100 had attended. By 11 o'clock, most had gone, leaving 30 or so members to begin a laughing impromptu concert whose noise spilled out into the dark courtyard. The singing stopped raggedly as a gesticulating, dripping figure appeared in the doorway. In a moment, the crowd was outside, bearing candles to illuminate the scene. It was a ghastly picture. A hideous pool of blood in the courtyard outside the door had run from the alley, tracing its ruby pattern into the crevices and pausing to dam into little pools between the round, irregular stones, each spawning little streams that trickled off in new directions. Almost half a gallon of the gore had spread itself in this way, and the now silent crowd stood incredulous and impotent. No one knew who set up the cry for the police, but it galvanized the onlookers, who set off to scour the nearby streets. The bull's-eye lamp of the police constable William Smith disclosed the still warm body of a middle-aged woman. Clothed in a black velvet, feather-trimmed jacket, her black dress was hitched up, revealing white stockings and dark boots. The red rose at her breast was crumbled and streaked with crimson, and her blood-stained fingers were locked around a packet of cachous, whatever that is. It's C-A-C-H-O-U-S. I have no idea what that is. I ain't gonna lie. The outfit was completed by a wide silk scarf, but not wide enough to hide the gaping wound, bearing witness to the one savage slash that had cut the throat from ear to ear, right back to the spine. It was almost 2 weeks before the body was positively identified. The inquest at the vestry hall in nearby Cable Street heard that the victim was Elizabeth Stride, also known as Long Liz, who had lived in the district for almost 20 years since arriving from her native Sweden. The register at the Swedish church in Trinity Square showed her maiden name as Gustafsdotter, and she had been born in Gothenburg on November 27, 1843. So that's actually 2 days after my birthday, November 25th. A rough entry in the ledger showed that sometime after her arrival, probably in 1869, she was said to have married John Thomas Stride. Of Mr. Stride there was no sign, perhaps because, as Liz had claimed, he had drowned in the wreck of the Princess Alice. I ain't gonna lie, that makes me kind of want to look into that. I actually don't know about that. Memories of the Thames disaster when the Bywell Castle steam collier had run down the crowded pleasure steamer were still fresh, although it had happened a full 10 years before. Trippock Point and Woolwich Arsenal, which was less than 6 miles away, almost 600 had died there, and many had been local people. But if Liz Stride's tragic story of the loss of her ship's carpenter husband and 2 of the 9 children that had been given little credence in life, the spotlight of the coroner's inquiry left little doubts that the legend was some pathetic tale dreamed up by Liz, perhaps to justify her descent into the streets of Whitechapel, where she plied her trade. At Woolwich Town Hall, the list of victims aboard the Princess Alice showed no Stride. Whole families had been drowned, but only one instance recorded a father of 2 children, and they were named Bell. A few bodies. Man, I tell you what, I don't know if you guys have been listening to this channel for a while, but we always run across that name Bell. There's something to it, I swear, dude. A few bodies had been cast ashore on the other side of the river in Essex, and had been dealt with by that county's coroner. Some bodies would have been washed out to sea, and would not have appeared in the accounts. But another list existed. The Lord Mayor had been moved to start a fund for dependents and it could reasonably be expected that Liz Stride would not have been too proud to have claimed if she had really sustained the loss. There is no entry in the Mansion House records. At the inquest, a collection of men came forward to state that they had lived with Liz Stride at various times, and Dr. Blackwell, whom the police had called to Berner Street, stated quite empathetically that judging from her appearance she belonged to an immoral class. The pastor from the Swedish church, who had identified her body, gallantly suggested that she made her living from a little sewing. Despite this, as the inquest progressed, it became quite clear that the maniacal killer had not deviated in his choice of victim. The crime bore one striking dissimilarity from the previous horrors. This time there was no other injury. It was thought that the killer had simply grasped his victim's silk scarf and abruptly pulled her backwards. The windpipe had been severed swiftly, allowing her no opportunity to cry out, and almost all her lifeblood had drained away. But there had been no other knife mark, no frenzied slashing of flesh, no careful collage of the innards around the corpse. If the killer had intended further injury, he had clearly been interrupted. Louis Deimschitz, who had discovered the body when returning from work, told the courts that in addition to his cheap jewelry trade, he and his wife assisted in the management of the men's club, something of a master of understatement. By the way, his name is Deimschitz. It's literally Diemschitz. So, Deimschitz is quoted as saying of his concern for his wife at the scene of the carnage, quote, I ran indoors to find my wife. She had a weak constitution, and anything of that kind shocks her. Several of the jovial choristers from the club said that they had visited the yard, the front door was locked, and returning members had to come back in the same way that Deimschitz and the pony had entered. It was certain that the body had not been there 20 minutes before. A curious anomaly developed when Deimschitz insisted that he had seen a bunch of grapes clutched in the dead woman's hands. The coroner reminded him that only the pack of breath-sweetening lozenges had been found at the post-mortem. One of the witnesses was Dr. Barnardo, the social reformer and founder of the children's homes, who had met Liz in the kitchen of a doss house at 32 Flower and Dean Street. She had seemed depressed and was the worse for drink. Around the area of Whitechapel there were many warehouses belonging to that dye trade, and it was in one of these that the key witness named William Marshall worked as a laborer. He had seen Long Liz just before midnight, kissing and cuddling a well-dressed middle-aged man, short and stout, with a small, round, peaked cap, sailor style. He had heard plainly the mild, well-educated voice saying, You'd say anything but your prayers, and Liz laughing gaily at it. She had also been seen with the man at 12:30 a.m., by P.C. Smith, and 15 minutes later by a late supper seeker on his way to a chandler's on the corner of Berner Street. He had heard her say, Not tonight, some other night. Quarter of an hour later, her body was found. Within 15 minutes, Liz Stride had moved silently and swiftly from the obscurity of the ill-lit East End streets to national and lasting fame. Jack the Ripper, though clearly interrupted, had struck again. And now we'll move on to the next murder, which would be the murder of Kate. Now, this is where it ties into conspiracy and Freemasonry. I did a whole video on this. I'll try to leave it in the credits if you're on YouTube. It's I believe it's titled Jack the Ripper and the Freemason Connection. kind of explaining the whole conspiracy side of it. So we've already covered that. I've already covered it before, so I'm just going to cover the basic murder of it now. The sleazy streets of the East End bear names that seem to have been selected by their builders with some contrariness. Stinking alleys have grandiose titles, and moth-eaten, scarcely verdant spaces are glorified with the name quote-unquote park. For the visitor in 1888, any visions of ecclesiastical ceremony conjured by the name Mitre Square would have quickly been dispelled. The square lay behind the church of St. Catherine Cree and Leadenhall Street, and was bounded by a couple of dwelling houses, in one of which lived a city policeman. Only one of the three entrances to the square was wide enough for the carriages that called at the three large warehouses, the other entrances being pedestrian paths in one of the provisions warehouses of Curly and Tong. That night the night watchman paused in sweeping the staircase to make yet another cup of tea. George Morris's years with the firm had accustomed him to the long night. He liked his own company. His days on the beat, when he had been in the force, had taught him that. And there was always the odd visit from the patrolling policeman, to while away 10 minutes or so. His was a quiet square, and only occasionally would the silence be broken by the noise of a prowling cat or a steady rhythmic tread of a passing constable measuring the quarter hour. The shrill scream of the whistling kettle was almost drowned by a pounding at the door. Outside, hammering frantically with his truncheon, stood the familiar figure of P.C. Watkins. The tall city constable grabbed the watchman's shoulder. "For God's sake, man, come out and assist me. Another woman has been ripped open." Morris tried to calm him, at the same time reaching beside the kettle for his matches. "All right, son, keep yourself cool while I light a lamp." Already the constable was running back to the carriage entrance at the southwest corner of the square. His lamp beam shook as he motioned towards the dark shape lying in the shadows beside the railings. Morris raised his lantern and gasped in horror. Spread-eagled on the pavement, her shape marked out in blood, was the body of a woman. Later, Morris would ask himself how this could have happened in the silence of the square. He had heard nothing. It was impossible that a victim could have screamed without him hearing her. However, unbeknown to Morris, the silence was not the most remarkable thing about this terrible crime. There was something else. Not 5 streets away, similarly nightmarish tableau had been presented. A killing of less than an hour before, as if in some grisly rehearsal of this butchery. The only difference was that at Berner Street, the killer had been interrupted in his hellish purpose, whereas here, despite patrolling police, he had had time to carve his obscene trademark. So this is 2 murders in one night. The woman's dress, with its gay pattern of Michaelmas daisies and golden lilies, had been pushed up to her waist and bunched up on her bosom together with her undergarments. Her stomach had been entirely laid open with a sharp knife. The intestines had been detached and were festooned about the right shoulder in a bloody veined mass. More of the viscera adorned the victim's left arm. The constable's wavering light picked up the great gash in the woman's throat, and as Morris raised his lamp to her face, he felt his churning stomach reach up to meet his throat. Her face had been all but hacked away. Alternately, shrieking and blowing his whistle, the watchman ran southward towards the main entry to the square. More police arrived, and about 20 minutes later, in a dash from Cloak Lane police station, where he had been sleeping, came Major Henry Smith, the City of London Police Commissioner. Although the majority of the enormous sprawl of the metropolis is watched over by the Metropolitan Police, there is an area just 1 mile square that is the jealous preserve of oft-times taller men, who wear a different uniform. They come under the control of the Independent Committee of Aldermen, unlike their comrades in the Met, who answer directly to the Home Secretary. These are the City of London Police. In taking his deeds across the boundary to Aldgate and Mitre Square, the Ripper had moved into their ancient domain. The killer's escape route lay north from the square via Duke Street, across Houndsditch and Middlesex Street, back into Whitechapel and into Golston Street. In a narrow close off, nearby Dorset Street, the little-known public sink still contained the blood where he had stopped to wash his hands. There was no doubt that the killer knew this labyrinth intimately. Back in Golston Street, Constable Alfred Long, a patrolling policeman, had discovered 2 important clues. First, he found a bloody piece of the victim's apron lying outside the doors of the flats which formed Wentworth dwellings. Inside these doors, at numbers 118 and 119, the constable came across a message that had been scrawled hastily upon the wall in white chalk. This is the message. The Jews are not the men that will be blamed for nothing. And Jews spelt as in Jewes. And this ties in with Freemasonry. Like I said, I covered it before. I'll leave it in the credits so you can click on that and check out the conspiracy side of it. Some of the words appeared to be smeared with blood. It was 2:55 a.m. The constable knew that the clues had not been there 35 minutes earlier. Whether in retrospect, the fleeing killer would really stop in order to perform these graffiti. And considering the time inconsistencies, it may be that this clue was nothing but a red herring, written coincidentally by some practical joker, or about another matter entirely. But that, as it may, the writing was considered so important that no less a figure than Sir Charles Warren, Commissioner of the Met, was informed. Golston Street lay back in the metropolitan area, and the divisional chief, Superintendent Arnold, fearing a riot, wanted the message rubbed out. City detective restrained him, saying that he would wait by the evidence until daylight, when a photograph could be taken. Sir Charles arrived at the scene at 5 a.m. It would be daylight in an hour. The commissioner acted decisively. 7 days later, at the inquest at Golden Lane Mortuary, the mounting incredulity of the city coroner can be gauged in this exchange with Major Smith. Why weren't the words photographed as you ordered? Response: someone in the Metropolitan Police ordered them washed away. Who gave this order? Sir Charles Warren, I am informed. The Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police ordered that a message that might be in the killer's own hand was to be wiped away? I believe it had something to do with his fear of anti-Semitic rioting in Whitechapel. Did you comment to the press that Sir Charles Warren had wiped the message clear with his own hand? I was so informed. The court heard that various suggestions, such as rubbing out only the top line or the word Jews, had been rejected by the commissioner. It was not long before the body was identified. Catherine Eddowes was well known to the police. She worked a small area of Whitechapel and had been, in fact, in police custody less than an hour before she was killed, having been taken into Bishopsgate after being found lying drunk on a pavement in Aldgate. It was usual to allow drunks to sober up in the cells and then release them without punishment. And this is what happened to Kate. Whatever the folly of letting a half-drunk woman onto the nighttime city streets, Kate had left the police station singing loudly before loudly sometime before 1 o'clock. From there to Mitre Street is about 25 minutes' walk. It was in these last fateful minutes that Kate had met her killer. So basically, man, if she would have stayed like a full night, like she would have survived, which is crazy. The large, draughty mortuary building was crowded with witnesses, spectators, reporters, and city officials. 50 or more people thronged the long, dark gallery which formed the main room. The city solicitor questioned Mrs. Eliza Gold, who told a complicit tale about her sister's life. Oh, a complicated tale, I'm sorry. Kate had been married for 8 years to Thomas Conway, and had had his initials tattooed on her arm. He had run off when she was about 26. She had lived on and off at the notorious den of thieves and prostitutes at 55 Flower and Dean Street. Her latest husband, in common law, was John Kelly. She sometimes used the name Kelly in pawn shops and other transactions. John Kelly, a laborer, seems to have been genuinely fond of his paramour. He identified the body, and his evidence was punctuated with tears as he told of the final weeks of their 7 years together. Each September, the hop fields of Kent supplied work opportunities for Londoners, who would make the 40-mile journey to pick up the hops that went into beer making. The pair had left London for the fields of Coxheath on September 1st. The going rate was a shilling for 7 bushels, and Kate, as he called her, was unwell, so they earned very little. It was at this time she made an extraordinary statement to Kelly. She claimed to know who the Ripper was. Reward money was being offered, and with her knowledge their immediate financial problems could be solved. They had walked back to Whitechapel the previous Thursday. Their pathetic pennies had been shared to get lodging separately, and on the Saturday morning Eddowes had pawned Kelly's boots for half a crown to buy some food. Kelly walked barefoot. However, many criticisms are offered to the modern state welfare provisions. A glance back to the way in which our grandfathers ignored the poor heap's harsh judgment on the leaders of the wealthiest state in Europe. Kelly's evidence completed, Dr. Frederick Gordon Brown, surgeon of the City of London Police, entered the witness box. Quote, "The body was on its back, the head turned towards the left shoulder, and the arms were by its side as if they had fallen there. Both palms were upwards, and the fingers slightly bent. A thimble was lying on the ground near the right hand. The clothes were drawn up, the left leg extended straight down, and the right leg was bent at the thigh and knee. There was a great disfigurement of the face. The throat was cut across, and below the cut was a neckerchief. The upper part of the dress had been pulled open a little way. The abdomen was all exposed. The intestines were drawn out to a large extent and placed over the right shoulder. A piece of the intestine was quite detached from the body and placed between the left arm and the body. The lobe of the right ear was cut obliquely through, and there was a quantity of clotted blood on the pavement. The blood had been there for only a few minutes." The doctor gave more details and included his findings about the knife. Because it had hit Gristle, he could tell how the knife had made the cut. The knife was about 6 inches long. It was held so that it pointed towards the left side, with the handle towards the right. He considered that the killer had a good deal of anatomical knowledge of abdominal organs and ways to remove them. The cause of death was hemorrhage from the left common carotid artery. Death had been immediate. Poor Kate. At 43, she looked 60. She was generally emaciated. Kelly's evidence was punctuated by reference to gin, which contrasted strangely with the complete lack of any mention of food. In the pathologist's forecast, that she would have been dead from Bright's disease within the year. Bright's disease is a condition known as Jenny kidney. It is brought on by excessive intake of alcohol. The pathologist had made his deductions from a single remaining kidney, for one had been removed. The authorities would receive a grisly reminder of this some days later. Following the first murder, displeased with the progress of the police, tradesmen had formed themselves into the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee to offer mutual protection and reward for information leading to the apprehension of Jack the Ripper. Their chairman was a mile-in builder named George Lusk. That's funny, George Lusk. That's the same name as the Amityville father. A few days after Kate Eddowes' murder, the chairman found himself the recipient of a most unwelcome package, a cardboard box containing what appeared to be a human kidney arrived at his office with the following unpunctuated letter. From hell. Mr. Lusk, sir, I send you half the kidney I took from one woman, preserved, for you t'other piece I fried and ate. It was very nice. I may send you the bloody nif that took it out, if you only wait a will longer. Signed, Catch me when you can, Mr. Lusk. Lusk forwarded the revolting object to Major Smith, who had it examined by two pathologists. Dr. Openshaw, pathological curator of the London Hospital Museum, proclaimed the kidney to be that of a woman about 45, in an advanced state of Bright's disease. The kidney had been placed in spirits shortly after its removal. Another independent examination by Dr. Reed produced the same findings. Newspapers scoffed at what was seen as a hoax, but the public laughter petered out when Major Smith revealed that the posted kidney had 1 inch of renal artery attached. A female human renal artery is about 3 inches long. 2 inches have been found in the corpse. So there you have it. There's 2 murders of Jack the Ripper and a creepy-ass letter that he left with the kidney that he sent in the mail. I hope that's creepy enough for October, and I hope that, guys, gets you in the mood. I hope you guys look forward to this October, and like I said, I have several rerun episodes from the old channel that you guys might not have heard, Halloween-type stuff, and that's what I'm going to try to focus on this month, unless some crazy news comes out. You know how crazy the world is right now, but I hope you enjoyed, and sorry for staying gone for so long, but, you know, family comes first, and you got to take care of family, so y'all have a good day.
We are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret society, opposed to secret oaths, opposed to secret proceedings. Secret proceedings. No official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.